All right, so from the fender video, a lot of folks wanted to see the, I guess, start to end process of scanning and building something. So I'm going to preface this video right here. It's not necessary to scan this, but I'm going to do it just to walk everybody through it. A pair of calipers would absolutely do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a brake bracket to hold my new calipers. What I've been running was Integra or Civic EX calipers for the most part with a fast brakes kit, which utilized this bracket, which essentially bolted here, offset the caliper enough to accommodate a 11-inch Corrado rotor. On the track page, I found folks talking about these AFCO calipers. I don't really know exactly what they're a clone of. There's lots of controversy about what they are, but I can tell you they take a Wilwood Superlight bridge bolt caliper pad or a brake pad. So this here, I'm running XP8s, Carbotex, which is what I've been running in that, but this caliper is massive in comparison. The rotor, here's the 11-inch that I've been running, and I decided to just utilize a Wilwood 2-piece here. So that's what we're gonna go with. So first, let's scan this setup here. We're gonna walk you through that. And what I'm gonna use, and you don't have to probably for this because it's pretty matte, but I've got an Einstar 3D scanner set up there. You could use baby powder, tons of different options. This is probably not the cheapest avenue, but it's the, I'd say the easiest just to go grab and buy real quick. It's just some athlete's foot spray. Basically what we're gonna do is, because the actual scanner uses IR, so it's right, anything that's got a reflective surface, it's kind of hard for it to scan. I'll be honest, this whole setup here probably would scan without it. But I'm gonna spray this on here just to kind of aid the process. So what we really want is these tabs more than anything, so I'm gonna kind of focus on them. Maybe I'll want that for something, I don't know. Get behind it. I really think it's gonna have no problem scanning this to begin with. So what we're gonna really need it for is gonna be this rotor. So as you can see, it's kind of on there, and let's just kind of get to scanning here. All right, so when your Einstar opens up, I could calibrate it, but we're just gonna go past that for now. New project group. We're just gonna call this CRX. We'll call it, whoops, AFCO adapter. Confirm. Now there's a bunch of options in here. I don't feel like you have to do the texture. If you click texture, essentially the LEDs are going to light up, and it's also going to grab colors. I don't necessarily need that, but sometimes I do find the texture feature with little intricate pieces tends to work a little bit better. But for this, you know what? Whatever. We'll leave the texture on. Confirm. Here's your new project. It's going to make it. And I immediately will go turn on the data quality indicator. Essentially, it'll show you colors on the screen. When it's green, you know you've got enough data. Simply hit the play button on the back here. And we will see what we got here. Now, the up and down button is going to give me basically more or less brightness of what it's going to see, which will ultimately control this knob. So if I just will go up to, I went up 4. If you look at the top thing in the top left there, you would see stuff got a little bit more red. The idea is to get it just to be barely red of what you want. This little down slider right here, that's basically just its field of view. So like it's at 400 right now. If you look at what it's displaying on the screen, if I go all the way up, you can immediately see it's capturing a ton more. Now, I don't necessarily need all that stuff back there. That doesn't mean, you know, I don't want it eventually. It just kind of depends on whatever your application is ultimately. So we'll just kind of put it back there. And we're going to hit play. If you look on the side left there, on the left side, there's a green indicator, meaning you are good. If it goes blue, you're too far away. If it's red, you're a little too close. So you can see, right, it's getting the coil over and stuff like that. We'll eventually just chop all that out. Again, the green, good. And we're just going to try to get right is this caliper mounting bracket more than anything. And I am not using any dots, so really all it's trying to find is features. So anything that's a big flat surface, it is not going to work very well. You're going to definitely need like some kind of... But this seems to have enough features, so we should be pretty good. Purple there was because it just lost tracking. You go a little too fast, or you get an area where it can't really track textures or can't pick anything up, it has an issue. See how it's all dark there on the screen? So I can simply just kind of hit the plus button on this, brighten it up a little bit. You can see it paused it. And let's sort of just zoom in and see what we got going on. Whoop. So as of right now, you can see we got the caliper bracket decent, but the backside is hollow. We don't really have its true thickness. We could probably figure it out down there. We don't have any data. So with that said, we know what we need to kind of focus on. So we're going to hit play again. We're going to watch it. Yep, found where it's realigned itself. So we're going to try to pan. I'm going to increase the. Now you look, you see a bunch of like hot spots all over the top left of the camera window. Let's just pan this slowly. So we're going to try to get my hand all the way back in there. See how the flange there is real red? I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Might help grab the data a little bit better. I'm going to bring it back up because we know we didn't have any data underneath it. All right, it's kind of thin. There's not a lot of stuff tracking it, so it might be a little. All right, let's try. To get the bottom one there. Looking way better. We can see there's a little bit of data missing there on the bottom, but I don't know if we're going to ultimately need it. That might still be sufficient. There's a little bit of some noise around the outside right there, but software can clean that up. We can clean it up. I would say we've got enough information here for sure. So now what we're going to do, I don't need a lot of this stuff, right? So we're on the lasso tool. I'm gonna hold shift. There's no point in keeping a bunch of this stuff. See how I highlighted a little red there? We're just gonna end up deleting that. It's unnecessary information, and all it's gonna do ultimately is make my model that much bigger, which I don't need. What else do we want to cut? Don't need the traction bar. Really don't need. Now I do want to leave a little bit of stuff. We're going to hit the delete key. Got a little another fragment kind of hanging out there. Really don't need all that. Do we need the brake cable and stuff? I mean, no. But I do want some other information, and I'll show you why later. Ultimately, I'm going to align two scans. And some of the more information that it has to snap to, the better, within reason. And if worst case, we can manually snap it. So let's hit OK. It's basically just going to delete all the stuff that we just had there. This might take a second, depending on the speed of your computer. This laptop's pretty decent. All right, so here you go. This is what it looks like. And because we did a texture, it kind of grabs all the color, which is kind of super cool just to look at. Maybe it gives you a better idea what your scan looks like. Over here, we have a show hide texture button. Click that, and now we can just kind of see what the scan looks like. I'd say it's really good. We got some good useful information, pretty much all we would need. Now I'm going to, ooh, don't delete it. I'm gonna go to the project list. I'm gonna add another scan, leave it on texture, confirm. And what I wanna do now is, I kind of would like to scan it with the rotor on it, so I can be able to gauge a depth from the rotor to this actual faceplate. But I didn't want to do that first, only because it'd be kind of hard to get the front of the actual lug mounting holes here. But, so essentially, that way, I'll be able to get a caliper scan. I'll be able to drag the caliper over and essentially just sort of slide it on top of this, and I'll have a full scan of all of this. I'll be able to toggle off a scan with and without the rotor. So now I'm just going to put this plate on top, or my spacer, just to make the lug nuts not go down as far. Not make them have to. That's all. And now, because this rotor is super shiny, it's going to be huge issues. So, same things before. Really just the area that I kind of need. Again, really all I'm going to need of this is kind of this chunk of the rotor. But nonetheless, we'll get a little bit extra just to help it align, and then I can delete from there. So now we'll go back to scan setting. All right, so we're just basically going to repeat the same thing now, and just try to get a good scan of this with the rotor on it now. Just work our way around again. Now it might be able to pick up the too soon. Let's lower that there. Try to get the sides of the rotor there. So you can see how I just I decreased to kind of help. I decreased some of the brightness. And now we just sort of got the side of the rotor there pretty good, which is important to me. Again, I mean, worst case, like I know the thickness of the rotor. I could measure the rotor and we could reconstruct this later in CAD. But if I don't have to really reconstruct anything and just work off just... Stop it, see what we got going on. Pretty good there. We just need to get the back of the rotor again. I said, again, don't really ultimately need it because I've got like an edge there. But I do want to get the caliper mounting brackets and stuff again, the back sides. Really to just kind of help the overall scan align more than anything. I'm going to need some points for it to go off of. Let's see what we got there. I mean, honestly, that's pretty decent. We got a little bit back of the hub. Don't really care about that too much. Honestly, that's probably enough data. So let's just see if it is. So I'm going to repeat the same thing here and chop all this up and process it, and I'll resume there. All right, so here it is again. You can kind of see with the color and stuff. Looks pretty cool. We'll show it the high. Well, we can see just the scan. Back, that rotor looks good. Front looks good right there, and the lug mounting holes are all good. So now what we're going to do is go to project alignment. We got our first project. We got our second project. And I'm just going to hit apply. Up here you have automatic. I'm just going to let it do its thing. We'll see what it ends up doing. Sometimes it gets a little wonky. I think there's probably enough details in there. Let's see. We're going to look down here. Looks like we do. I'm going to hit next, exit. I'm going to hide the texture. And now you can see basically you've got the blue and you have the white, and that's essentially mixing the two scans together and see what data we've got going on there. So that looks really good. If we zoom in there, you can see the front right there. We've got a ton of data. I think that's really going to be good. So now, if you click Mesh Model here, it's going to convert it into something that I can sort of work with later on. These are sort of the defaults for the most part. I think I actually tweaked them a little bit. Let's go to recommended. You can see, okay, that's the defaults. If I get off that, that's sort of what I did. So the simplification does lose some detail, but the file in this thing is probably going to be massive. So I'm shrinking it a bit, remove small floating parts. Let's say there's like some tiny little bits of, I'll call it bad data that's just kind of floating around out there. It's not really connected to anything. This just kind of gets rid of that stuff. The higher the value, the more it'll be. Remove spikes, I guess kind of the same thing-ish. We're going to hit apply. We'll let that just sort of do its thing. All right, so there it is again. You can kind of move it around. Let's just hit confirm and let's see what we ultimately, texture color is incorrect. That's fine. Let me turn the texture off again. Let's see what we're actually looking at, what we're working with. And ultimately, I'd say this scan is pretty good. There's some garbage, as you can see there, like in the hole, but that should be enough. There's some stuff missing up there. But ultimately, we could go back and really make this scan good. But for what I'm doing, this is just really a quick and dirty. I try to leave most of this live so you can see how fast it transfers and everything. We will just sort of leave this the way it is. We got a bunch of features up here now, though. So simplification, you can see right here, it's basically going to be 63 megabytes. It's not a huge scan. I'm not going to mess with that. You can do something like auto hole filling. It's going to find a bunch. I'm going to do manual hole filling. It's now going to just sort of look and see where it thinks there's a hole. There's just one spot I do want to repair on the lug. Honestly, probably don't need it. But, and you can see here, it's kind of like identified everything that it thinks is a hole. Like, let's go to up here a little bit. And if you leave it on curvature, some options, curvature, tangent, flat. Curvature, if you watch, what it's going to try and do is grab the surrounding area here and essentially do what it thinks it is. We'll click there. It does a pretty good job, I'll be honest. And you can sort of see there like what it's wanting to do. And honestly, that's probably all I'm going to do. Oh, there's one over here. I'll just kind of click that one too. I'm going to hit confirm. It's basically going to patch those holes. If you have some like bad data there too, or like something that's really weird, you can sort of just cut that out and then do that. Let's do the smoothing feature, maybe, which will also ruin some detail, but sometimes it just makes it easier to work with a little bit later. There's so many variables in the software. Let me preface that. I'm just doing a really quick and dirty method of this that will get me by. It'll work. I know that for a fact. It really just depends on the application of what you're doing, whether or not, how much detail you want to retain and whatnot. I don't know if you actually are able to see that, how it just sort of got rid of that. So let's like focus on like this area right here currently. And if I undo this, it's going to be kind of hard there to show you, but of course it zoomed out. There you go. Try to take a mental note of what that looks like right there. We'll do it again. Just do a 50%, hit apply, mental note, we got it. Let's see what it looks like. You'll see it's going to smooth stuff out to make it look nicer. And again, you need to know the application of what you're trying to do, whether or not this is worth it. But if it picks up a bunch of garbage, sometimes it is just worth it. There you go. That was probably a pretty good view of what that just did. And honestly, I'll probably just leave it there because it'll make it easier for me to snap to certain areas later. And it'll be okay. So I'm going to hit confirm on that. And ultimately now I've got my model. But before we exit this, I'm going to need to, we're going to click up here to measurements. Got a whole new tab here. And I'm going to do a line. I'm going to go to quick alignment, or sorry, 3-2-1 system. I'm going to make a plane. Well, I've lied. That's where we're going to ultimately go. Where are you? We need to create some features first, or the way that I end up doing this. So we're going to click over here, which is the plane. I want to do 3 points. So what I want to do is I'm going to find something, and we are going to, let's just click up here, down here. I'm going to assume these tabs are on the same plane. Let's put one a little bit away from it. Let's put it there. And we are going to create this plane. We can kind of get a little gander at it. And there's the plane that we've got now. Now let's create a line. We'll do point to point. I'll just do from like eyeballing right there. About right there. I'll create a line. We will do a point now. I'm also just going to put the point right there. We're going to create that. Close it. Now we can go to the align feature. Basically just trying to make a coordinate system here. So constrain the plane itself. Let's go to plane 1, the line. We're going to choose line 1. Point, we're going to choose point 1, and we're going to align and see what we get. So there you go, right? Now that's what it, based off of how I clicked, that's going to be, and it shows you right there. There's my X, Y, and Z. So what I don't really like about this is, let's go that way maybe. It's all kind of personal preference of how you want to design something. There's no really right or wrong. Sure. We will hit close. And from here, we could just go to save your scan. Well, wrong folder there. We will go back to the AFCO adapter, and I'm going to call this AFCO adapter, and I'm going to save it as an STL. Now, granted, an STL is not going to contain all this color data that we already grabbed, so it's kind of irrelevant that I grabbed it. I just do it sometimes because I feel like it grabs minute details a little bit better sometimes for what we were doing, but it was not necessary. So we're going to uncheck object, and I'm just going to call this, I'm going to add the STL to the end of that, and hit save. It'll save, and we're going to open that up a little bit later. All right, so here we are in Fusion 360, and I want to just preface, I'm going to show you guys some rough ideas of how I went about doing this, but I'm not going to walk you through the entire thing. If you're looking for actual tutorials on how to draw in Fusion, this is not going to be it. I'm going to get, this is like a really quick and dirty kind of version here. So first I want to insert the actual knuckle assembly that we scanned and exported as an STL. So that's going to be this file right here. And it's going to ask if you want to do it in inches or millimeters. It's going to default to millimeters, even though I'm going to be drawing in inches. So I'm going to leave it there, but let's go to the top view. Let's see what we're looking at here. And you can see how I did the alignment with an Einstar. It's off a little bit. I kind of want it this way. Again, it's all preference. Maybe you want to draw in that direction. I want to draw it like this. And if I was really going to do this, I would probably try and get these holes to be a little bit at 90 just because my OCD. But we're going to send it for there. And if we look, you can see like all this ugly brown data here in this current case right now. It's like the back of like the coilovers and stuff like that, right? There's no data there, so it's just hollow. But what we aimed for again was what we got here. We got the lug points. I got some rotor, and there's some garbage. Don't get me wrong. This scan was very fast, and it was just to get what I really needed to do this. You can see how the holes, which I'm going to show you guys in a second, where if I did the holes and I got them a little bit better, it would benefit me, but it is what it is, and here we are. So the next thing that I did off of camera was I also scanned the caliper. So let's open that file. There it is. Open. And go back to my top view. So you can see it's kind of oriented in the exact same way that my knuckle assembly came in. So let's just rotate it the exact same. And if I grab this little box here, I can move it now. So what I'm going to do just for this little video here, I'm just going to try to get these lugs kind of eyeballed in the center here. When I really made this, I really focused on getting it, within the middle and equal spacing and everything. So we're going to just leave it there. And the next thing you'd probably want to do, again, would be to try to get, right, it's kind of hard without the brake pads, but I wanted to make sure I had total coverage of the caliper, so when the pads are inside, that it's covering all of the rotor surface. But here we are. So now we've got both. Got both pieces, so I can see the lugs, different heights. If I wanted to, I can just kind of click the caliper. I can hit M on my keyboard for move, and I can move this just up and down in this axis, the Z axis. If I wanted to try to get it more centered on the rotor, which arguably would be an important feature for what we're doing. But for this, I'm going to leave it right here. I'm going to go back to the top view. And over here in the bodies folder now, if I wanted to, I can click them on and off as I please to see them. So here's what we're going to do first. This is how my kind of brain thinks. I know that I'm going to utilize the shape of the caliper here and the shape of the knuckle assembly here. So I'd like to maybe make a plane on the top of this slug, bottom of it, and so forth on those two. It makes things a little bit easier. I'm not going to do any guesswork on measuring this. I could measure it again with calipers. I could also, hit I for inspect on the keyboard, and I can just kind of click things and just sort of whatever, right? Boom, there's some values. Either way. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to hide the knuckle assembly. Go back to the top view. I'm going to right click. I'm going to say edit feature, which brings me to a mesh options here. I'm going to go to construct. I want to do a plane through 3 points, and it's going to naturally want to snap, right? So if you see when I simplified it, see all these little triangles? If I would have left the file without simplifying it so far down, there'd be a lot more triangles. This is where the accuracy part kind of comes into play. I'm going to click there. I'm going to click there.
And we're going to assume these lugs are on the same plane. So let's click down there, and there's a plane. It's got a little view of it. Does that look good? Yep, that's the top surface of it. I'm going to hit OK. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom. And it'll probably make sense to you guys on why I did it. And you don't have to do this. It's just kind of a preference on the way that I like to draw and make things. Takes some of the guesswork out a little bit, in my opinion. We're going to click OK. So now if you wanted to, here's the construction. Here's my 2 planes. You could right-click this, and you could delete stuff, whatever you want, move them around, blah, blah, blah. So there's my 2 planes there. I'm going to say Finish Direct Editing, go back to the top. I'm going to hide these 2 planes just so I can work a little easier right now. We're basically going to do the exact same thing to knuckle assembly. And I'm only going to do it to the top because I'm not going to go thoroughly into this, but you'll get the idea, I'm sure. So let's do one there, let's do one there, and we'll just do one there. And then there's a plane. Got it. Okay. Finish editing. So now I've got 3 planes. Here's my pieces. Let's just pretend this is exactly where I wanted it. This is, same spot. Cool. What I'm going to do now is let's go to create. I'm going to say I want to create a sketch. And I'm actually just going to choose this plane right up on the top here. Kind of oriented it back the way it was. Let's just rotate my view. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to do a rectangle. You get some options as you can see. Let's do a 2-point. And I'm just eyeballing this right now for this video here. But let's just click. Let's go a little, let's just, we'll click here. That's the first corner. Second corner is going to come down to, I don't know, we'll just say here. Hit enter. Cool. Now, I'm going to say finish my sketch. I go with my sketch folder now. If you want to, right, you could rename this if you wanted to and call it, whatever you want, just for organization's sake, which I typically do when I get a little busy. So I'm going to take this sketch. I'm going to click it. Whoop, if I can get in there. There it is. Hit E on the keyboard for extrude. And it's like, how high do you want to go? And you can do distance, and I can just sort of drag this guy, go up, down, do whatever I want, right? I'm going to just say I want to go to an object. Let's turn my planes back on. I'm going to choose this top of this plane. Boom. So it's just going to automatically extrude that right to whatever that height may be. And I'm going to click OK. All right. So for conversation's sake right now, we can say, cool, we got a block that's kind of fitting in there roughly, but the caliper would obviously be hitting it and so forth. So let's actually hide the knuckle assembly for right now. Just hide those 2 planes just so we can see some stuff here. And we got a little better view of it. So my intention right now would be, I want to get these lugs. You can see where they're kind of poking through. But they're, if I was to look at a side view, they're just inside of this block. So that's obviously not going to work. So let's hide the body that I just drew. And now we're going to go to the Mesh tab. This is where the scan, the better the scan is, is where this comes into play here. I'm going to go to create a mesh section sketch. So what it's going to try to do here is, it's going to try and automatically draw a sketch around whatever I'm asking of it. So what body do I want to choose? Caliper. Section plane. So if you notice right now, this brown line here, it's going back and forth in this direction. I'm going to re-enable my planes. Not that one. This is where I'm renaming stuff. So here's the top plane, right? So I'm just going to choose that. And now if we zoom in, you can see the brown, how it's kind of like dirty. It's not really getting good data there. But I can grab this arrow. Let's get a little better angle. I can grab this arrow. And if you can look at the brown, you see how it's like, maybe brown, orange, whatever color you want to call it, how it's outlining whatever the scan is, right? And don't be wrong, you can now take this, you can grab this and you can angle it, you can do all kinds of things with it. But just for this tutorial-ish, if you want to call it that, I am going to just, we'll call it right there, right? So we have a good outline of like actually where the lugs are, the inside of this. You notice though how the holes, they can't really get a good hole because my hole just didn't really have good data in it. So we're just going to click OK. So I just kind of traced that, for lack of better words. Let's zoom back out. Let's just turn all the construction planes off for now. Bring this arrow down. Let's get rid of that. And there's the trace that it did, right? But I can't use this data, arguably, right now, because it's not really anything I can do anything with. So if I double-click Sketch 2, I come up to Create. I'm in the Sketch window now. Fit curves to mesh section. So if I leave it like on a spline tool and I just hit Close, where are you? Close profile. If you notice, it tries to do that entire profile right there. That's cool and all. I don't exactly need that, but you could do it if you wanted to. Really all I need is kind of like from here, this shape, around, right? But let's just click all of it. Why not? It is what it is. So we'll click all of it. Got it. Hit OK. And now the advantage of, I can turn this off, and now you can see the actual profile. I can extrude this. I can do whatever I want, which, right, now there's the interesting part. So what I can do is we're going to finish the sketch. I'll just hide the actual part there. The body is there now, right? So if you look now, my sketch is in it. So I can just click this, hit E for extrude. I'm going to go just straight up, cut whatever's in its way. Cool, got it. And now, where we go, bring my sketch back. I'm going to click it again. And we know that if I bring my caliper back, let's hide this body, right? We know we made a profile in theory to the bottom of where this caliper is, where this lug is per se, right? So with that being said, let's just say that my caliper, I got it spaced where I want it, and I know this is the area that I want it to sit. I know the center of this is over the rotor exactly where I want. So if I bring my, let's hide this. This is where it starts getting a little messy. We're going to hide the caliper again for a second. I'm going to click this, hit E for extrude. I'm going to bring the body back. Oh, excuse me, let's hide the body for a second. So I can click that profile. This profile is the bottom lug, the bottom of the lugs. I'm going to click it. It wants to naturally extrude to that thickness because there's nothing in its way. Let's bring the body back. Now it wants to cut it. And as you see, it's cutting that exact shape. So I'm going to hit OK. I can hide my sketch, bring back the bracket, and boom. Now my caliper, in theory, would sit in it. Now that being said, this is not exactly how I would do this. I mean, it's a similar idea for sure. But right, we know that this line that it just traced is basically spot on, right? So realistically, I mean, you'd open the sketch. I would hit probably O for offset, and I would say, let's do, I don't know, let's say 20 thousandths. We're going to flip that. And we want to put this line out that way. That way there's some room for the caliper bracket to breathe, right, a little bit. If you have it right up against it, it's just you're asking a lot for tolerance's sake. But again, this is just showing you guys a rough. So, I mean, now I've got a body there, right? And the body has a cutout for the lugs. So we don't know where the holes are, but I've got a good visual representation. So I am going to, let's just open up the same sketch that we already have going. Bring that caliper back and let's hit it. I'm going to hit C for circle. Let's hide the constructions just to get them out of my way. C for circle. And I'm just going to kind of click the center of this and just kind of come out with it. What is this hole diameter? I don't know. Let's do 450 thousandths. And we can kind of see, does that look pretty close? Pretty close, sure. Come down here, do another one. That one I didn't put a good center on. So I can just kind of click it, hit M for move, and I'm just going to kind of whatever, right? Like eyeball it. Now that being said, again, when I made my actual bracket, I made sure that, you know, both these holes, basically both these holes to these holes on the knuckle were the exact same. Like this distance and this distance were exactly the same. That way I know the bracket and everything's going to be all uniform to itself. But you get my point, I think. So finish that sketch. I'm just going to get rid of that for a second. Hide that. These are here, so now I could technically just click these, hit E for extrude again, bring back my body. I'm just going to click go through all of it. It's going to go through everything. Okay. Hide all the sketches. And there's like my bracket starting to form, right? So we know my caliper can just kind of, and I can always bring it back in and out. It's there. Holes are all the way through. How does it look on the knuckle? Right, arguably this needs to kind of probably come down here. This, which you can always just grab. I can extrude, but again, if I made another plane, like I was going to down here, I could just extrude this down to that plane and start cutting stuff away. I think you get the idea. But I'm not going to go all the way into it like I said, but let's kind of come over here. And here's my final version of what I came up with. So there you go, same concept. And you can see how I just talked about offsetting that. I gave it some breathing room for the caliper to breathe in. I don't remember what the distances that I gave, but I did some 3D prints to kind of test it out. There was no need for this to cover everything. And you can kind of see how I shaped it down there. And yeah, that's that. So first version was to 3D print it, test fit it all, and then get it machined. All right, so there's a 3D printed piece. And here's now one made out of metal. So I'm going to reuse my bolts. Again, these are M12s, and then the caliper bolts themselves are M10s. These bolts came with my fast breaks kit that I used.
So I'm just gonna end up using these again. They're a little bit longer than needed, but I don't mind a little bit of extra thread protrusion coming through the back just for some extra grip. So it's pretty self-explanatory here. Some folks say Loctite. I'm just gonna put a little bit of some anti-seize on them just to help not gall the aluminum threads. And that's actually what I ran on the fast brakes kit too. And I hadn't had any issues. So they're just hand tight. So for a CRX, at least in the owner's manual, the caliper bolt, like the actual caliper mounting tiers of the knuckle, is 53 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna do the exact same here. All right, so the bracket's torqued to 53 foot-pounds, nice and solid. Now we're gonna have to mount the actual caliper, which is gonna go back here. And now you can either order through AFCO the spacers, or I ended up ordering some spacers myself that are 0.5 millimeters thick. The driver's side I already did, that ended up not needing any spacers. So you might need one, you might need two. Every cast here is just gonna be a little bit different, so it's kind of for you to play with. So let's get to that. So rotor's mounted, brackets torqued. And again, this is where the recess is for the actual caliper. So if you look, it's just gonna kind of slide in there. Maybe kind of hard to see, but that's where it sort of sits. Now, the instructions with the AFCO caliper, and a lot of calipers have like shims, as I mentioned earlier, that go, in this case, you'd put them right here, which would push the caliper out. So when this was machined, or when I 3D printed it, I printed it so in essence the caliper maybe sits a little bit this direction to allow cars to shim it. That said, the driver's side, when I put it together, worked out fantastic. It was just even. So good or bad, however you want to look at that. So now, because I'm not using any Loctite, I'm gonna throw some more anti-seize on these. We're gonna try to install this first without any shims. And again, these back here are M10 by 125. These are a little longer than they need to be, but because it's aluminum, I'm just being a little over cautious, and I'm having them extend about 2 threads past. That way I know I got some good grip. And I'll show you, but the thread protrusion on the outside of this won't really harm anything because it goes inside the rotor. So it should be fine. And AFCO, I think, says like 18 foot-pounds. That's what they tell you. Granted, that's like a generic, since this can fit many of things. I'm gonna go to 25. Still shouldn't strip out the aluminum by any means. We'll put some paint pen on it later and monitor it. Drop the pads in here. Has some wiggle room there. Throw this side in. Honestly, I think beforehand, it's just because the 3D printed bracket, I couldn't really get a good torque on it. It's kind of hard to push this apart here, but I mean, that's pretty money, I'd say, the way it sits. I'm gonna leave that. Caliper's rigid. Let's put the bridge bolt back in now. All right, so we're after a track day. Now the pistons have, everything's kind of settled, I would say. So you can kind of see the gap there and the gap there. So now, as I showed earlier, if you wanted to, you could probably put some spacers on the inside where the caliper sits to kind of push it out a little bit. I might do it, I might not. I might just leave it alone the way it is now. But let's see about the torque. Let's get some light here. Looks like good. Looks like it's all good, actually. So all torque stripes held up, bracket held up good. This is just some crude 3D printed bracket I made there because the Wilwood didn't have a line to come with it. Here's the actual rotor face, and we can see the pad is making contact with pretty much the entirety of the rotor, so that's good. All right, well, all right, if you've made it this far, I just want to say thank you. This is probably one of the longest videos I think I've put up. A lot of you guys have been asking about how the scanning process kind of works, and then maybe how I make some of the things. So hopefully this just kind of itches that just a little bit. But if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns about it, throw it in the comments below. I'll try to answer the best I can. Message me on Instagram, whatever the case may be. Other than that, again, I appreciate it for watching. I don't know what the next video is going to be, but the S2000's had some more progress. I ended up cutting the trunk pan out kind of crudely, nonetheless. Just kind of broke a lot of the spot welds. Again, it looks pretty atrocious. I might just put some bars across. is what it is. That might be the next video. We'll see. But as usual, stay tuned for the next video. And I always appreciate everybody for watching.